It's from Moxie Marlinspike, which is a fantastic name. I don't know how anybody gets the name Moxie Marlinspike,
Is
but
that a
that is a
natural name? Is that a natural birth
uh,
name, or is that like a nickname?
allegedly. But he's the guy behind. He's a very very significant crypto person, and that's crypto as in the original crypto, which is cryptography. He
Mm-hmm.
is like a hardcore, absolutely, and he's the guy behind Signal and the and Signal is also, for example, the encryption system basically that WhatsApp put in. And so he's an absolute top brain cryptographer. He really understands how to put public key cryptography and all the different sorts of cryptography to work to make messaging secure. And Signal, I believe, is a pretty secure platform. And he's heavily into privacy and all sorts of other stuff. But so he put out this morning or whenever in the last day or two this thing about saying he's not really into he's not really into crypto as in our cryptocurrencies. He's never really got excited by it. But he tried out Web3 to see what all the fuss was about. So he actually built some Web3 apps or dapps. But what he really built was stuff on Ethereum. And he's got this long post, some of which is very, very good, about the fact that all of these like NFT buying things, they all wind up calling on like two different API servers, which are both run by big companies. I think Infura and Alchemy are the two API providers that sit behind almost everything on Ethereum. And MetaMask just interacts with Infura and Alchemy. And I don't want to sort of go into the huge technicals here, but for us on Hive, we've got something similar going on because we've got Hive Keychain, which is in your browser, and that needs an API server to interact with. But we've got dozens of those. If you go to the drop down in your Hive Keychain, and it's sort of buried because it's not a setting that most users have to think about unless stuff's going wrong. I think it's in preferences, and it's called select an RPC node. And this is typical Hive stuff. Why is it called RPC nodes here? But sometimes it's an API server, but when you click on that, you see API deathwig.me, API Hive Kings, Annex, Farasim, Emre, Hive Engine Comp, Privex, Osbit, Ecency, TechCoderX, Hive, Archange. It's like, wow. And so Ethereum's got two, and how much is Ethereum worth? Approaching $1 trillion. How much is Hive worth? But yet we've got a much wider selection of APIs, and they're run by us, not by some big multi-billion-dollar backed venture capital thing. They're our community guys. We know, if you've been around in Hive, you know the names, and
We
Three
know where
Speaks
you.
running one. Well, but we don't even know where they live. I have no idea who is. I
I
mean,
got no idea. I'm working with half the time, to be fair.
exactly. But that's great. And what Moxie goes into in this blog post is that what he actually did was he put up an NFT which he sold on OpenSea, but he did something not malicious but just fun. He realized that most of these NFTs, they just link to a website that serves up the image that you've bought. So stored on the Ethereum blockchain is a note that you own this, stupid picture of a monkey or whatever. But it's just a link to a web server. So what he did was he said, okay, well, my web server can work out when you click on the link, it works out where you came from, whether you're looking at this picture from a wallet or from the web or what your IP address is. So if you're looking at it in a wallet, you get a picture of a shit, a sort of an emoji shit. And if you're looking at it from OpenSea, you get some nice pretty picture and so on, but it's different every time. And you know what happened a few days later? OpenSea just deleted his items. They removed it. Why? Well, we know why, because they run the only API. So even though his NFT is technically on the Ethereum blockchain. If OpenSea's API doesn't say it's there, it's not there. And we know that this can be done in Hive. Like if an API stops showing a blog post, you won't see it. But here's something really different, is that we've got so many API servers. Speak Network. If one of them started blocking stuff, you would just move on to another one, and that would fall out of favor if it was like maliciously censoring stuff. So, this major problem that he identifies with the whole Ethereum network, and the way that OpenSea, which just raised more money at a $15 billion valuation, it's fundamentally broken because it's centralized, and in a way that we've already solved. Hive has solved it. Anyway, I'm talking a lot.
No. I thought that was a really great point that you make. You're giving some tangible examples of some of the stuff that me and Dan talk a lot about, and I didn't know that story. I mean, I know that I can just assume automatically that most of these successful systems are already centralized. And I knew, for example, on OpenSea, that they do run a centralized database that stores your images. And it's why I mentioned the Speak Network, because the Speak Network aims to solve that, because the images, the hashes of the images will be stored across the IPFS network, and they'll always tie back to the same image, and it's going to be a decentralized storage system that's incentivized. So it's like it solves that issue. The foundation is there to remove that issue from being a problem. But yeah, I mean, all of these things, they're building, they're growing, and they're getting investment in, and they're gonna trap themselves because their economic models aren't correct, and the way that they're storing the system, their stuff isn't correct, and eventually it's going to be liable to censorship and deals cut behind the back with the regulatory authorities, and it's not going to give real Web3 economic sovereignty to their users ultimately.
Absolutely, and OpenSea only exists because VCs are just piling in with vast amounts of money. So
right.
They've got all the money in the world to host these, you'd think, indefinitely. But at some point, this will collapse because they're just, what they're selling is bullshit. It's bullshit, because who cares if you've got some mark of ownership buried in the Ethereum blockchain from 3 years ago? Without an API server running for the rest of your life, you will never be able to find it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and what Moxie goes into here is,
without off-chain incentivization, there is no Web3. Blockchain fails. Everything fails, because no matter what, things are going to get bigger and bigger. Big data is involved. We have to decentralize the infrastructure to create our own Google data centers, our own APIs. Everything that we're starting to see as we're babies walking on Hive. You see, people are running APIs, not necessarily getting incentivized except for witness earnings, and just they're incentivized to keep the network up because you're a stakeholder and it's distributed. But as you get something like Speak Network, now it's like, okay, break up the big data. That is going to be incredible, because now it's like, well, now I have an NFT or a link or whatever, but at least it's to something that I know is censorship resistant. I know that this is going to be stored redundantly. I can pay to store it for as long as I want. I can see who stores it. I can store it, which is most important. Make it easy for people to do that. But this is just another screaming example of big data centralization of Web3 via convenience. People choose to use this. People millions and millions of dollars on this. It became the de facto, and then you get all the celebrities piling in and all that, and then it becomes what people think Web3 really is. But illusion can become reality, so we have to. But like you said, it's born to fail, because no matter what, at the end they're going to cash out, and when they cash out, the community going to run it, or that's the whole point here. So yeah, it's
there's another side to this, Dan, where I think the legacy big data, big tech companies are playing into, and I think this is how it goes. This is why you've seen the sudden move away from Web3 and the attack on the definition of what Web3 is. Where's Web3? It's Web3C, all this stuff, right? What's Facebook's strategy, for example, on the metaverse? They are doing they've gone straight for religions, from what I've seen recently. I've been doing some looking into this. They've gone straight for all the religions, and they've set up religious sermons in Web3, and they've got a lot of religions to sign up to it because of the whole COVID thing. Okay, you can come and do your sermons online. The sermons can be even bigger. They can scale bigger. And they know the religions have got a certain amount of people across the world, so they're going to get an audience. And they're doing this across various different community types to get these communities into the metaverse without even, I mean, none of these people know what Web3 is. None of these people know what self-sovereignty is online. They just know that, Facebook can give me a sermon, right? And then you get in all the concert goers, so they're doing deals with all the big pop stars. They're running their own concerts in Web3, in the metaverse, Web2. We should definitely call that Web2 because it's all owned by Mark Zuckerberg. And then it's going to be a case of, can you get the businesses set up around the sides of the concerts? And then it becomes like a Google Maps thing where no one's going to go to your bar unless you're listed on Google Maps. And then you have to go list yourself on Google Maps because that's where everyone is. And that's what they're trying. It's a race. It's a race of people like us who know what Web3 is and are able to help people get onto that, to let them have self-sovereignty onto an ecosystem that they own, or people that are clueless to this because they just don't know, getting sucked into the Facebook side of things because Facebook's going to scale so massively and run that. And the idea is that they'll reach a critical mass and then it's over because everyone's already beyond there. And then we'll still be over here on Web3 shouting, hey, come over to Web3 because you get to own your own account, That's the plan, that's where they want to take it.
It's the same as what happened with YouTube in Hollywood, right? Hollywood used to be the gatekeeper to get any kind of entertainment out. YouTube, right, started out innocent or whatever. I don't care how it started out, but what it did was decentralize information where people could then become their own movie stars. You got PewDiePie and all these people who are able to reach millions and millions of people. Obviously, that's not the case anymore. It's been misconstrued. But this is happening again, but for value creation, right? It was governments that could only print their own value, and no one else could create their own currency. That was bad. That was illegal. But now the YouTube effect, this crypto effect, where people can now, community can come together and create their own value. And people, that was made illegal because it's incredibly powerful, incredibly destructive to centralized forces who try to coerce and force people to use a paper currency that's backed by violence. That's incredibly destructive because now you don't rely on that because they can deflate that, they can manipulate that, they have complete utter control over that. But your currency as a community coming to consensus saying this is what we all agree with and the majority agree, that's where we go. Mentality, and you have a bunch of people interacting within one sovereign base layer. You'll have a few of those floating around. They're just so damn incredibly hard to make. That's the end goal, and that's the race. That's the counterpoint here, because there's overly centralization, but for the story to go on and make sense, there has to be a counterpoint. The counterpoint always starts off incredibly small, but you see the signs, and we have to really push that decentralization of third parties, make the convenience factor, make Web3 fun. And the thing we can do that they can't, go create a token on Twitter, go create a token on Reddit, go create a token on any centralized platform. Well, you can't. There's a reason. KYC, security, yada, yada, yada. Go create a token on Hive Engine. Did you need to ask anybody? That's where it is. And they can't stop that. They can have totalitarian measures to try to stop it, but then a revolt happens. But you can't stop that. They can't. It's over. So that's the game. Now we have to just bring people over and make them, teach them how to create this value and rep it into.
Well, I think we're going to show them. I think people will be able to see it happening, and they're going to be able to see the sovereignty and the freedom that they don't. Obviously, to get into the metaverse, there's going to be a certain point where you need to comply with certain things that the establishment wants you to comply with that you don't that don't necessarily go along with your freedom rights. Let's say
it'll be that link from the first tweet. It'll be that
right.
Do you live in any one of these countries? Do you
right.
This was something that I came across when during the whole Steam Hive, the fight, the war. I sat with Andrew, and it's like we were looking at whether Steam originally had terms and conditions or Steam it, and Andrew had never really paid much attention to it, funnily enough. But we went and looked. But the whole way that Steam it had set up the acceptance of the terms and conditions, that was actually bogus anyway, because you already had your keys by the time you clicked on, do you want to accept these terms and
I mean, that was on steamit.com, wasn't it?
On steamit.com, yeah.
On Steam, the blockchain,
and that was the only and that's the point. And to this day, we've got no terms and conditions to join Hive, because where would you put them?
The terms and conditions are built into the chain, aren't they?
The terms and conditions are, the code of the chain. That's if you've managed to put in an application to get an account, that's it. But those don't exist in a legal sense. You couldn't go to court over those, because courts aren't going to be able to understand them yet. But but they're real, but they're just a different form of legal document.
Yeah, when you attack Hive, it just gets bigger and bigger and stronger. That's been proven by the ultimate pre-mine exchange attack, which we solved both of. But that's the thing. If there was a scaled attack on Hive, we would only grow. It would be the worst thing they could do if they want to stop it. So no matter what, I believe we're heading to an event where it's going to get big. It's going to be the elephant, and they're going to try to attack it in some way, maybe in all ways. And I think it's just going to be like hitting a beehive.
Maybe that moves on to the other thing I dropped in, which was
let me just have one more bite here.
You go. Have a.
So basically, the other thing that's interesting here is with the distribution of these tokens that are going to be unregulatable, you're going to have governance built into these tokens. And things like the Speed Network, we're talking about exponentially increasing governance based on the amount of time that you stake your tokens for. So the closer you get to the pledged stake, say you pledge to stake for 6 months and you get to 5 months, you're going to get a much stronger governance weight and vote than you would do if you only stake for 1 month. We're going to be able to build in all these different factors for governance and different kind of strengthen the governance. And that's all going to be by default inside these unregulatable tokens, which are inside these unregulatable communities. It's just layers and layers of complexity as well that's just genius. And then on top of that, you're going to get real world use cases for this, because this is all theoretical. We've proven it works with the Steam Hive saga. But what's going to happen is at some point, these Reddit communities are going to get regulated. Something's going to happen where someone's going to make a call and say, no, you cannot do this, stop it. And they're going to shut it down and going to move on. And people are going to moan and they're going to say, oh, Reddit, no. And then they're going to go to Twitter and do it there. And then someone will do it. And eventually, at some point, maybe we need to figure out a way to make this happen earlier. But it's going to happen to a community on Hive, where there's going to be a community on Hive that pokes the hornet's nest. And the hornets come in and try to fucking suppress it and stop it from happening. And then that's when the pin will drop and everyone will be like, holy shit, that's the only one that they couldn't stop the regulation. They couldn't regulate. And that's where the flip's going to happen, because they're going to realize, hold on a minute, these people have got their own sovereignty. They can vote for their own directions, their own way forwards. They've voted. There's nothing anyone else can do. And now the protocol's changed and moved on without the authorities say so, and the authorities are just left behind. That's Rocky, where it's going to go.
Rocky he didn't become Rocky because he knocked people out in the first round. He became Rocky because he was still standing on the last round, and that's how I feel with Hive.